In this lesson, we are going to discuss how to create animated GIFs. Now, there's a lot of ways to create animated GIFs, and of course, there's a lot of different animations out there. So I'm going to show you the basics of how to get one started and to execute and also to export. Now, what we're going to create is a sort of swirling circle based off of something we've created with our polar coordinates exercise. It's going to look something like this. So if I bring this up here, you're going to see here that's just kind of swirling around and around. You can see it's kind of doing that whole thing. All right, now just wait for it to catch up, and that's going to be pretty much the speed that it's going to do. And of course, you can control the speed, you can control the content, everything like that. Now, this is going to be part one of what we're going to do. We're going to put something on top of this as well, because sometimes you just want to have this as a background, or maybe you want to have it a little bit lighter, you know, something like that. You want to be able to control this. Let me go ahead and get out of this, and let's come back to Photoshop, and we're going to take a look at what we've done in terms of a complete project. If you look over here on the right hand side, I've got all of the different layers that's creating this GIF. So animated GIFs basically are created from a series of layers all kind of threaded together. Now we're going to use a panel called the timeline panel. I'm going to show you how this all works together. Let's go ahead and go over here to Window, and we're going to come down here to Timeline, and you're going to see that basically this is what's going on here. One slide that feeds into the other feeds into the other. Okay. Now each of these slides, quote unquote, is based off of these individual layers. Now each individual layer has its own little rotation, and you'll also notice it also has a little bit of a blur on there that I've added onto that for the effect to create the illusion of movement. Okay, so you're going to want to kind of think about all those things as you're developing this. Now just understand that what's going on here is one is going into the other, into the other, into the other, into the other, into the other. And we've also got some other controls down here to be able to play it, to go backwards, and then also notice our timing, 0 seconds, so making it look like it's very fluid. That may not be the case for you, so you'll want to go ahead and check all those things out and see how you can do that on your own to accomplish your own animation. So how are we going to start this? Well, let's go over to here to an exercise that we had in the past. Let's go ahead and minimize that. Thank you very much. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to export this into its own document, and we are going to just start from scratch. So I'm just going to go ahead and right click, and I'm going to say duplicate layer, and I'm going to put this into a new document. All right, and I'm just going to call this Polar GIF lesson, and then very simply click OK, and now that's going to be on its own document all by itself, ready to be spun around and around and around. Okay, now I'm going to go ahead and just zoom out a little bit, because I'm planning on making this spin around and around and around, and because of the shape of this, it's going to need to be a little bit bigger than the canvas. So I'm going to go ahead and make this bigger than the canvas, so when it spins around, I'm not losing any content. So what I'm going to do is just do Control T to go to my transform tool, and I'm going to hold down the Alt and the Shift key at the same time and go like so. You don't really see any difference in there, but just understand that it is bigger than the canvas, so when it does spin around, I'm not going to lose any content. Alright, so go ahead and commit to that, and I'm good to go. Now, what's next? Well, I'm going to make this into a smart object. Why am I going to make it into a smart object? Because I'm planning on putting one of these blur filters on there. And just in case I want to change my mind, and also just for good habits, I may want to just have that as a smart object, to make it as a smart filter, to be able to go back to this or even mask it if I want to, just to have full control over it. So let's go ahead and right click, convert to smart object. And then when you're done with that, let's go over here to filter. I'm going to go over here to blur. I'm going to put a radial blur on that. So radial meaning just kind of going around. And that's again going to create the illusion. And just notice here my blur method is spin, and then my quality is good, but certainly you can make it best if it's not coming out the way you want it to, but that'll of course increase the file size. I'm going to keep this at 10, click OK, and let's just see what it does. And keeping in mind, if I don't like this, I can always change the filter very simply, because it's non-destructive, because this is a smart object. All right, so let's just go ahead and wait for that, and we're going to see in just about 10 seconds what this has done to my object in terms of a radial blur. Okay, and that's pretty good. That's good enough. I don't want to overdo it, but certainly this is a spice to taste moment for you. You can decide what's going to look good in terms of your own imagination, your own creativity. All right, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to start duplicating these because I need to have all the sort of ingredients for what's ultimately going to end up in my timeline. So I'm going to just start duplicating these. So I'm just going to go ahead and just do Control J to duplicate, Control J, Control J, Control J, and Control J. All right. Now I'm going to put these in increments of 30 degrees to have them rotate. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and just double click on this one, call this 1. Double click on this layer, call it 2. Okay, and now just so I can get started on this, I'm going to now rotate this exactly 30 degrees. So how do I do that? Well, I'm going to go back into my transform tools, and if you're not there already, I'm just going to go ahead and do Control T, and that takes me to transform options. And you'll notice up here on top, I have all of these option terms in terms of the width and the height and the X and the Y value. And I also have this one for rotating. I'm just going to go ahead and make this one exactly 30 degrees. Hit enter, and that commits to that. You may have to also hit that check mark if there's a little bit of a delay. Okay, now that that's done, let's go ahead and do the next one. And just keep in mind that could take a little while, just depending on your computer's processing speed. I'm going to go ahead and go to this next one. I'm going to call this one 3. And then I'm going to go from 30 now to 60. Go back to my transform tools and just make this 60. Commit to that. And finally, let's go ahead and do this last one. And we are going to rotate this one 150 degrees. Now you might be asking yourself, well, why don't we do one all the way to 180, all the way to 360? Well, guess what? With a shape like this, we don't need to repeat it, because if we did 180, it's going to look exactly like the object did when it first started, and then we'll have kind of like this weird sort of jump, because essentially it's going to repeat itself. Because if you have the 180, all it's going to do is just have one version of that kind of looks just like it, because we've made it into 180, and the one that already pre-existed. So having another one is actually going to get in the way. It's going to look a little bit jumpy. It's going to be kind of a little bump in the road. So this is really all we need, just to go almost halfway around the circle, because that ultimate 180 already exists as we see it right now. Okay? So hopefully that makes sense, but it will make sense in a little bit once we get into it and you see how smooth this is going to run. Okay, so now we have all 6 layers, all rotated, all blurred, everything. And now what we're going to do is bring up our timeline panel. If yours is not up, you can go over here to Window, come down here to Timeline, and this is going to appear. Let's go ahead and make that a little bit less crazy. And now what we're going to see here is hopefully an empty timeline. And if you look down in the middle, you're going to see a little drop-down menu. Now you're going to see either it's going to say Create Video Timeline or Create Frame Animation. What we want in this case is a frame animation. Okay, and that's essentially how animated GIFs are made. So I'm going to go ahead and click on that. And then I'm going to choose the actual button itself, and then that happens. Okay, so it actually automatically brings in something, right? So it's like, okay, it's cool. It's going to bring in the first one that's there, maybe the one that's selected, but we'll be able to control that stuff in a little bit. But what we want right now is to bring all of our current layers into the actual timeline. So if we click on this little flyout menu right here, you're going to see this option, Make Frames from Layers, right? Very simply. And you're going to see there's a few other options here as well if you want to control the panel, if you want to go back to the video timeline, right? And if you want to optimize it, you know, for different size and things like that. I'm going to go ahead and just say Make Frames from Layers. And then you're going to see, bam, it just pops right in. Okay, and if I just go from this to this to this to this, you can see how it's kind of moving around so beautifully, so fluidly. Love that. Now I'm going to go ahead and just click on this, and then right away I'm just going to go ahead and play it. We're going to see what it's going to do, going from one thing to the other, nice and smooth, right? Going all the way almost to the halfway point. And then it starts all over again because the 180 is essentially where I left off. Now, If for whatever reason you're doing a completely different one, you may want to change the timing. Notice how you can make the timing into something else, right? So let's just go ahead and just try 0.2 seconds. And we're going to see what that's going to do for this one. It's going to kind of stutter a little bit, right, when it kind of gets to that particular one, right? It kind of stops for a little bit. Now let's say I want all of them to be 0.2. What I'm going to do in this case is I'm going to select all of them. So I'm going to hold down the Shift key and then select the last one. And then let's go ahead and just choose this one. Let's just do 0.5 seconds so we can see what that's going to do. You're going to see that might be exactly what you want, right? It's totally fine. There's no right or wrong, just really depending on your preference and your creative vision. All right, I'm going to go ahead and stop this. And then I'm going to go ahead and select all of them again and just choose any one of these. I'm going to say no delay. Play it one more time. Nice and smooth. I love that. All right, now I'm going to go ahead and stop it. You're also going to see that there's another option here is, okay, well, how many times do you want something to be played for? So when you finally export this as your animated GIF, do you want it to keep playing and playing and playing and playing, or maybe it's just going to be 1 time, 3 times? Really just depends on you. Also notice there's this other. You can go ahead and just really customize that however much you want. Now you'll also notice that there's this little delete button right there. If I have something there I don't want it to be in there anymore, I can go ahead and delete it very, very easily. If I want to add on more, I can just go ahead and just say duplicate this particular one and then continue going on from there. But for my money, this is pretty good. I'm pretty happy, and I'm ready to now export this. So earlier when I showed you that example, that was an exported GIF. All right, so this has to be a GIF file in order for this to work, and it will work in websites and all kinds of other like PowerPoints and things like that. And nowadays, so many different mediums to be able to put GIFs on, and you see them everywhere. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go over here to our File menu, and we're going to say Export, and then I'm going to say Save for Web Legacy. I bring that up, and now even though it's legacy, it actually is going to have a lot of really great choices for us. Okay, and this is actually something I recommend people checking out whenever they're really trying to compare, different styles and different versions and different formats and different sizes and things like that. So you can see here I have my GIF, my GIF, and my GIF, and I have my original. But what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and just zoom out so I can really, really see it. All right, not too bad right there. Okay, now these are all 3 of them are GIFs, right? It's smart enough to know what I want to do. But if any case in the future, if you ever wanted to convert it to something else, you can do that, right? So in case, again, you are doing that comparison of your 4-up different formats. Okay, now from here, I just want you to notice that, yes, I have my GIF right here. I have the number of colors I'm using, right? Because this is a GIF. This is how it works. I'm going to use the maximum number of colors. This is great. It's also going to tell me the size of it, right? Because I have the number of colors that pertains to the size, and it's very, very small, 8 megabytes. But just keep in mind, if you need it to be somewhat smaller than that, you can bring down the number of colors. You can see that this will come down as well. So if I click on this now, notice this is a 64, and this comes down to 6 megabytes, right? You might find that your website can't handle the load. Maybe you've got a lot of different GIFs on there. So therefore, you might need to make the file size a little bit smaller. So you have those options there. And again, comparing, hey, 64 colors versus 128 colors versus 256 colors, does that really make a big difference? And in this case, there's really not a lot of colors because it's really just the black and the red and then maybe kind of the shading in between. So I'm pretty happy with this. But you know what? Let's go ahead and bring this to 256 just to see where it goes. Not so bad, and that is just over 10 megabytes. All right, now what we're going to do next is we're going to preview this. So I'm going to come down here to the bottom, and you're going to notice that there is this little play button. I click on that, and just notice there, it's comparing all of them, right? My original and all the other ones. And it doesn't look so bad. Okay, no matter really which one I choose, again, because there's not a lot of colors. All right, so let's go ahead and stop that. And then finally, let's go ahead and export it. So I'm going to click on Save. And this is going to take me to my dialog box, and it's going to save it as a GIF, which is great. It's exactly what I want. Okay, and let's go ahead and save that. And that's just rendering as a GIF, animated. I'll be able to see that in just a minute. Fantastic. I come back to my Photoshop file. But now let's go ahead and see how it looks inside of our class folder. And there is the lesson. There's the GIF. There's the original completed. Go ahead and open that up, see what that looks like as a GIF. And this is exactly what I want. Very cool. So let's go ahead and go back to our Photoshop, and let's just do a little bit of review to see, again, how I created this. So understanding that I just had a whole bunch of frames one by one, and I just rotated them, rotated them, and I had my little blur on there, essentially creating all of the different slides, if you will, for my animation, and then Photoshop just all pieced them together in the timeline with 0 seconds. And then finally I exported them as a GIF, and then it animated them all together. Alright, so of course your creativity is going to be a little bit different, but understanding that there's some nice tools to be able to help you to really piece everything together nice and fluidly depending on what you want to do. Alright, so in the next lesson we're going to see how we can use this as this nice little backdrop and how we can put things on top of it to be able to have a little bit more dimensionality and a little bit of texture, and using our animated GIF as a background and not necessarily as the foreground. And you'll see this in advertisements and other kinds of animations as well. Okay, we'll see you in the next lesson. Following up on our last lesson on creating animated GIFs, we're going to do a little overlay and see how we can use an image on top of our animated GIF. And we're going to use some nice advanced tools like working with blend modes and working with masks and working with clipping masks as well to create this nice effect. So what we're going to see here is we have this image that's kind of embedded into this, and I've taken this image, I've put a little clipping mask on there, then I put another mask on top of the shape that's creating the clipping mask, and then you're going to see that intermittently we're going to see different kind of blend modes to create this kind of cool little strobing effect. So let's go ahead and take a look at it. We're going to see there, it's doing all kinds of different things here. And the original image, you see how it interplays with the background image, and you're going to see also how that image is also rounded and a few other things. Now, of course, you can play with this however you like. You can make your creativity come through, and sometimes it's really a matter of kind of rolling the dice and seeing what it does with the blend mode. All right, so let's go over to here to our Polar GIF lesson overlay. And what we're going to do first of all is we're going to work with all of our layers here on the right hand side, and we're going to put them into a group. So if we take a look at over here, this has this little group 1 option right there. This is actually a group that we've put separate from the rest of it. So that's going to be the first thing we want to do. So if we come over to here, let's go ahead and just group everything here. So I'm going to go ahead and select the first one, and then hold down the Shift key, hold on the last one, and then very simply click on this little folder icon. And you know what? I'm going to name this. I'm just going to call this Sun Group, just like that. Beautiful. So I know that's going to be all one unit by itself in the background. All right, now very simply I'm going to go ahead and bring in an image. So I'm going to go to File and then Place Embedded, and we'll find that image. We'll bring it in right there, and that's going to be on its own layer on top of it. Okay, so great. I love that image. Beautiful. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a clipping mask to make it so it's just going to be a little circle around his cute little face, and also the little candle there as well. So now very simply I'm going to go over to here to my circle tool, and it doesn't matter what color it's going to be, and I'm going to do this neat little thing where I'm going to create a circle, but I'm going to draw it out concentrically by holding down the Alt and the Shift key at the same time. So you can see I can do that, and now that's going to come in, and then I can just very simply just drag that to where I want it to be, and then very nice, just kind of encapsulating where he is, his face, all that good stuff there. Move it around accordingly. Again, it doesn't have to be perfect because we can always change it after the fact. Now, I'm going to make this into a clipping mask, so I don't want to see anything else outside of it. I just want to see just his face and the candle, etc. So what I need to do is just bring the child up above, and now I'm going to clip this through. And very simply, all I do is hold down the Alt key, and I move my mouse right in between the two layers while holding down the Alt key, and then I click, and then bam, just like that, I've got this cool little shape all around it framing my image. And I can move this wherever I want. Maybe you want to put him a little bit more in the circle. Maybe you want to actually move both of them together. You can do that so they're more perfectly centered inside the circle, and just like that, we've got this cool little image, and then guess what? It's going to be on every single one of these. So let's go ahead and now play this as we go forward. You can see just like that. Now we have a cool effect. Even really just like that, you might be happy with it. And there we go. Now I want to make this a little bit more sort of like ethereal, if you will, all around there. And I'm going to use a very, very basic mask around this shape. And then I'm just going to use a little paintbrush, very soft paintbrush, to come all around the edges here. And that's going to create this kind of feathering look. So I'm going to go over here to my ellipse, come down here to my mask, and now just like that I have this white mask. And what I'm going to do is just paint black all around that. So go over here to my brush tool, and I want to make sure that my brush's hardness is down to 0. Now if you want it to be really creative with it, you can add on all kinds of different brushes, have a different kind of texture all around it. Whatever you want to do, it's really up to you. Maybe even want to do it kind of like strewn about his face, so it's kind of like speckled all throughout. Really up to you. But for right now, I'm just going to keep it so it's just going to be around the edges. So I want to make sure that I'm going to paint black, and I'm going to paint it on the actual mask itself, and then just like that, I can come around, just having that nice little soft kind of blend into this. And if I make a mistake, like, oops, sorry little boy, I'm going to go ahead and then reverse it, go back to white, and now he comes right back to life. Okay, so that's a really nice way to kind of create a little bit more of a sort of manual feather, if you like. Now let's go ahead and play that. And now notice again, it's going to be on every single one of my frames. Do that, and then bam, there you have it. So pretty neat, and maybe you love this just as is. Now let's go ahead and pause that. And let's just see, potentially, you might want to just make this a little more see-through. So if we take a look at this now, let's go ahead and make our image a little more see-through. So I'm going to go and bring down my opacity, and then maybe that's what you want to do. Great, bring this back up. Okay, but this time what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring down the opacity on the ellipse. And this is going to be a nice little precursor to when we do our blend mode, because you're going to see how everything's going to blend through both the image and the shape, right? Because this acts as a clipping mask, therefore speaking for the shape that's creating the frame as well as the image that's going through it. Now if I just bring down my opacity a little bit, we're going to see what that does, and it creates this really cool effect. And maybe that's awesome, you love that. So let's go ahead and play that, and you're going to see, all right, that's kind of nice, kind of interesting. Okay, maybe not as dynamic as what we saw before, but I'll go ahead and just bring this back up, and we'll see once again it's back to where it was before. All right, let's come back to our first image, and this is very important, by the way. When you are making your changes, if you want them to be on every single one of these frames, then go to your first frame. Okay, if you want it to be on individual ones, meaning that I want a blend mode that's going to be different on frame 3 versus frame 5 versus frame 6, then you would go directly to those frames. But me doing it on this frame is going to allow it to be kind of sort of a master that's going to go across on every single frame. All right, so let's just go ahead and just play around with these. Now I'm going to, again, choose my ellipse layer, go over to here to normal, and then let's just go ahead and play around with some of these. Let's go over to here, just for example, to multiply. And you're going to see what happens when I do that, right? That kind of brings these together, and it creates the multiply, right? So I have a nice little handout on what you can do. You can take a look at what each of these does, but most of the time it's going to be a spice to taste. So I'm going to go ahead and go through all of these, and you're going to see it's going to be a little bit different. Sometimes you're going to see that the foreground color becomes a little more dominant. Sometimes you're going to see that it comes a little bit more light versus dark, but it also is going to vacillate with this particular image because we're working with both the red and the black. If you had different colors that you chose for your sun, if it's going to be like a yellow or a red or a green or something like that, it's going to interplay with the foreground a little bit differently. Let's go ahead and try a different one here. Screen, also more lighting stuff. Color dodge, again, that's going to be about lighting. With our colors, it's going to pick out the different colors and see how it blends together with the foreground. And then light color, and then we get to our overlay, soft light, hard light. That's kind of an interesting one. Let's just go ahead and pause for a second and take a look at that one. I'll stop there. Let's come back. Let's go to vivid light. It's almost as if it's part of the image with some of these. And really it's going to be very much a spice to taste. Okay, so I'm going to come back to that one that I saw before. Really like that one. Pin light's kind of nice. Okay, hard light, that's kind of cool. Okay, now if I wanted to do a slightly different one for this one, let's just go ahead and just come over to here. We can see we have that. But if I wanted to just kind of like stop all of a sudden and do something a little bit different, I can do that. So let's go over here to, let's just say exclusion. Notice how this one, hard light, this one is hard light, this one is hard light, and then when I go to this one, you can see it goes to exclusion. So we're going to see maybe kind of like a little bit of a burst. Let's go ahead and do exclusion twice. Come down here, I'm going to say exclusion. So it's going to be sort of like a little sort of stutter step towards it. So I do this, see that? So it's kind of like a nice little strobe effect that we can create. So our GIF is still running in the background while we're having this guy in the foreground with all kinds of different neat effects. All right? And you're going to want to play around with this, right? You're going to want to really experiment with your own imagination, your own creativity, but again, using this layout of the layers of how I've set this up for you to make sure that you have your GIF in a group on the background layer, and then whatever you're going to put on top of it, you put it on the top layer above it, and then all of these other types of blending modes, it's really up to you. And if you're going to be using something like this with our masks and our clipping masks, again, up to you, but I just want to really kind of make this a full project so you can see how all this is done. All right, and then if you need some review on how we export this as a animated GIF, you can go ahead and watch that last video.
If you're not a subscriber, click down below to subscribe so you get notified about similar videos we upload. To see the full course that this video came from, click over there. And click over there to see more videos from Simon Says It.